The Football Outsiders live stream for Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022. Hello to everybody watching right now on YouTube and Twitch, Facebook, Twitter. Hello to everybody listening after the fact on the Football Outsiders podcast network. Remember, you want to be here at 1 o'clock Eastern on Tuesdays and Thursdays so you can ask us questions live. And, of course, we'll take lots of questions and comments from the audience. We're going to talk today about the Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks, preview those chapters of Football Outsiders Almanac 2022. We have Mike Tanier back from vacation. He has returned from Europe. We have Vincent Verhei, the author of those two chapters, and we have a special guest, Matt Harmon, from Yahoo Fantasy Football, as well as the very famous now Reception, because receivers are a big part of the story of those two teams. But before we get to the Rams and Seahawks, we should talk about the breaking news this morning. So let's talk about the Miami Dolphins, who have been penalized their first-round pick in 2023 and their third-round pick in 2024, not for tanking, but for tampering. Technically, this is for tampering because apparently they were in contact with Tom Brady from back when he was still with the Patriots, continuing when he was with Tampa Bay, when he was under contract with other teams, and they were in contact with Sean Payton even when he was under contract still to the New Orleans Saints, and that's a no-no. But what's interesting about the decision from the league is that it came down and said, this is not for the tanking allegations, even though Stephen Ross may have said something to Brian Flores about losing games for $100,000. We think he was just joking.
Well, I hope he was just joking because the Dolphins went 3-2 down the stretch that year. And I think one of the things that's being lost when we talked about this, Stephen Ross is, a scuzzball, like so many of them are scuzzballs, but like you can't penalize someone for tanking if they didn't tank. And Brian Flores did not tank. He may have been pressured to tank, whatever. That's a separate thing. But I am impressed by Stephen Ross's master plan here to simultaneously get Tom Brady and lose games on purpose to get Tua Tagovailoa, and then bring Sean Payton into this. That is a very stable and well-reasoned plan there by Stephen Ross. He is a football genius, and the Dolphins are going to miss him at the beginning of this year.
I mean, someone responded to me on Twitter. I said, if Miami was in touch with Brady since August of 2019, when he actually became a free agent and they actually could negotiate with him, why didn't they get him? And the answer is they're really bad at tampering.
Yeah.
And at tanking, because they went 3-2 while tanking.
I think the biggest takeaway from this is they're not being penalized for tampering. They're being penalized for being caught tampering. This is all it's still new to me because I'm a West Coast person and a night owl. My alarm clock went off an hour ago, and so I woke up to messages and tweets about Stephen Ross, the Dolphins, and everything. And so I thought, well, I'll educate myself. Let me go to NFL.com here. Lead story is a Fan of the Year contest. Then we have stories on Deshaun Watson, OBJ to the Ravens, ? 3 running backs set for a year 2 breakout. Nothing about the Dolphins. I see Cardinals. Lewis Hamilton is mentioned. The Hall of Fame game. Matthew Stafford's elbow. There's nothing here about the Dolphins and Stephen Ross, and I can't imagine why.
Oh, my goodness. In fairness, it only happened an hour ago. So your alarm might have, boop, 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 boop. Stephen Ross has been suspended. That might have been how your alarm went off.
It may have been, yes.
I also like in Stephen Ross's statement how he says, they obviously didn't find any wrongdoing with the tamper or with the tanking allegations. Totally accept that. Absolutely true. But I don't believe this tampering thing, but I'll accept it anyway. So it's like all the things that are good for me. Yeah, they nailed that in the investigation. All the stuff that's bad for me, that's fake news, but I guess I accept it anyways. It's very classic stuff.
There's some people online who feel, and this is definitely, I think, a possibility, that they simply got them on the tampering because if you get them on the tanking allegations, you make the whole league look bad. Like, it just makes everybody look bad, the idea that any team was losing on purpose, even though, as Mike pointed out, Brian Flores was not going along with the plan, and therefore they were losing on purpose very badly. But The tampering allegations certainly are worthy of penalty. You can't be talking to guys who are under contract to other teams. And I mean, the Sean Payton one might even be worse than Brady, because at least when they were talking to Brady, you knew Brady was going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Like, Payton is still property of the New Orleans Saints. Like, even if he wanted to come out of retirement, you would have to, trade something to the Saints for his rights or something, because he's still under contract for this year. It's a mess. So, I mean, I definitely see where the penalty comes for tampering. And it's a big penalty because it was really important that Miami had 2 first-round picks. Yeah. Because if what we expect happens and Tua is mediocre, they needed 2 first-round picks to trade into the top of the draft to get one of next year's top quarterbacks. If Tua is terrible, they'll already be at the top of the draft. And if Tua is really good, they won't need to get one of those quarterbacks. But the most likely outcome of the year is that Tua is mediocre, and they go 8-9 or 9-8, and they have to trade up for Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. And now they just lost the trade, one of the picks that they needed to make that trade.
Howie Roseman wins again.
I mean, there's a lot to process here, but I'm looking at the official Dolphins statement. Any issues related to tanking, and all of Brian Flores' other allegations, they say he claimed to have been cleared, which I don't think that's true. I don't think that's exactly how it works. But
no, it's not really what the league found. And there is part of that sort of like, oh, we don't want to admit that anyone ever suggested tanking, although Moneyball's great. Moneyball's wonderful, but tanking is bad. Also, it looks like Don Yee said, oh, this doesn't involve my clients at all. Here's all the evidence. Now you have Stephen Ross dead to right on this, on Peyton and on Brady, whereas you don't have that in the Brian Flores situation. You have a meeting that happened 3 years ago in a smoke-filled room, and one person says one thing and one says the other thing. So we've got you dead to rights on this. Hey, Al Capone, we've got you on tax evasion. Also, keep an eye out to not do any more murders.
Thor Dane wants to know who won Fan of the Year. I'm assuming the contest is still ongoing.
Yeah, they're advertising entries for the contest. So Thor Dane, yes, get your entry ready. You can do your own research to go to NFL.com and see what it takes. But I encourage you to give it a try.
All right, so Football Outsiders Almanac 2022 is out now. If you watch our show regularly, you know that. We've talked all about how you can get it on Amazon. That's the big print version that Mike is holding up. Or
bright and pretty.
It's beautiful. It's in LA Rams colors because they're defending champions, and that yellow really pops.
Yes.
And the PDF version you can get by becoming an FO Plus subscriber. Go to footballoutsiders.com/subscribe for more information about how to become an FO Plus subscriber and get not just the book, but the Kubiak preseason fantasy draft tool and our fantasy projections during the season and the picks against the spread and all of that. So our question of the day is about the Los Angeles Rams, and it is, if Odell Beckham Jr. were to re-sign with the LA Rams, who becomes the Rams' second wide receiver? Is it Allen Robinson or is it Odell Beckham? Which one of them would have priority? And that gets us to the biggest reason why, when we talked to Matt about doing one of these shows, this was the team that I wanted to really have him on to discuss, because Allen Robinson is one of the most interesting players in the league coming into the 2022 season. For years, the deal about Allen Robinson was the statistics were not as good as the play on the field because of the quarterbacks that he had throwing him the ball. Last year, at least to my untrained eye, it certainly looked like he had just lost something. And whether that is that he was a step slow or whether it was emotional, I just don't care anymore. I mean, that's what happened to Randy Moss in Oakland. After what happened to Randy Moss in Oakland, I don't write off the idea that a player just can not care anymore and just go to a new team and a new situation, and suddenly all that talent is back. So I wanted to talk to Matt about what reception perception says about Allen Robinson, who he was before last year, who he was last year, what he still has, and what he brings to the Rams.
Yeah, and Robinson is probably one of the players that's most kind of directly aligned when you think about reception perception, because, I mean, it was that was the first like big prediction, was that he was going to have that breakout season in 2015. Shout out to me, I guess, right, for being correct on that. But yeah, like I've always thought that he had all the skills to be a legit, like, prototypical number one wide receiver in the NFL. And his 2 years in Chicago in 2019, 2020, like you mentioned, they were not as statistically prolific, not like a top 5 fantasy receiver, leading the NFL in touchdowns like he did that 1 year in Jacksonville. But he was legitimately up there, like 97th percentile in success rate versus man coverage, which is the main metric that reception perception tracks, like how often they're beating man, zone, press coverage. And when I say it tracks, what I mean by that is I track, right? Like for those that are not familiar with reception perception, what I do is over an 8-game sample for NFL players and college players, chart every single route that they run, how often they get open on each route, how often they run each route type, how often they open beat, man, zone, press coverage. Really the goal is, which is a perfect player to talk about, Allen Robinson, in this way. Like, how do you isolate a wide receiver from their surrounding variables? Because you guys know this, all your super smart listeners know this. You need a lot of help as a wide receiver to put up good stats. And I don't think Allen Robinson has always been that guy that's gotten the help. So, but when you look at him in isolation, I think going into last year, he was putting up some of the best success rates, whether it's versus man or press coverage, across the entire NFL in 2019, 2020. Now, last year, I agree, certainly not that player, but I don't think he completely fell off the map either. You know, he was still relatively high when you look at success rate versus man press coverage. Did fall off a good bit against zone. I think a lot of that can be chalked up to scheme as well. I mean, you've got freaking Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney with the Bears. You know, Mooney's like a speed-based receiver as well. Matt Nagy's gotten him running like almost 40% like flats, curls, slants. And I know they didn't have a good offensive line, but these are vertical guys that you want to release down the field. So I think that a lot of it was a lost year for Robinson. I put a lot of that on the surrounding variables. You know, Fields, I like Justin Fields as a prospect, but he was pretty bad overall as a player in his first season. So to me, it was a lot of, you know, whether Allen Robinson cares or not, or cared last year, I don't know. But if he didn't, I sure couldn't blame him, right? You know, dealing with injuries, rookie quarterback, bad coaching staff, a franchise that didn't pay him despite his, you know, ton of commitment. So I really think that Robinson is going to smash this year. I definitely fall on the very positive side of the projections because I think he's still got it as a player, and this situation is awesome for him as well. So I'm very positive on Robinson this year.
He's been getting rave reviews at training camp.
Yes, rave reviews.
Right. And at the same time, there's a little concern there. Van Jefferson has gone down with an injury. Yeah. So whoever's the number 2, if Odell returns, there's room for a number 2 and a number 3 right now, and targets to go around.
Right. If Odell returns, though, Odell would probably not return till mid-season. So that doesn't solve your Van Jefferson right now knee problem. So the first couple of weeks at least, they're going to have to use Ben Skowronek or Tutu Atwell. I remember Playmaker Score liked Tutu Atwell, but he is a tiny little dude, and he's done nothing last year.
Right.
And they don't seem too jacked up about him right now either. Like,
No.
you know, he's not necessarily just going to walk right into that number 3 job with Van Jefferson. So it's not great. I mean, tough to use your second round pick on a receiver, and then you can't even really count on that guy right now.
On a team that uses his wide receivers as much as almost anyone. Jordan Rodriguez for the Atlantic had a story on how the Rams are going to cope without Jefferson, and she suggested a committee with Skowronek, Atwell, and other random spare parts they have laying around, which is possible, but it'd be a very non-Sean McVay thing to do. He's not a committee guy. I'm sticking with my 11 guys, and we're going down the field. So that would be an interesting change of philosophy, an interesting adjustment to circumstances. But it does show that Jefferson or no Jefferson, there may be room for Odell on this roster still.
Yeah, and I like what Jordan said in that article. I read the same article. It's like if you start shuffling in Skowronek and Atwell, you know, the tiny guy and the huge guy who can block, you're just dictating what you're going to run. Right?
This is a run. This is a deep ball.
Right. And that's not exactly how Sean McVay likes to do things.
I wonder if they would sign someone who's still out there like a T.Y. Hilton or an Emmanuel Sanders to get them through the early part of the season. I mean, obviously that doesn't move the needle as much as a healthy OBJ, but you're not going to have a healthy OBJ.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyone want
Even when Beckham gets back, what kind of state is he going to be in too? You know, this is his second torn ACL.
Don't know.
It is super it's a pretty recent one, obviously in the Super Bowl. So there's a lot of questions there. I think a trio of, and I like Van Jefferson too, by the way. Like, I think he's a pretty good player, at least like a decently promising guy coming into his third year. So I think it's a kind of a sneaky big loss, like you guys mentioned, for a team that plays its guys and runs 11 personnel a ton.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone want to take a crack at Brodalicious'
Sorry, go ahead.
Anyone want to take a crack at Brodalicious' question about the
will Robinson's performance, if significantly improved, be more of a referendum on Matt Nagy's scheme or the quarterback carousel in Chicago, or is there anything that would definitively tell us that?
All of the above.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't
I actually think that Matt
baseball.
Nagy at times like has done some decent stuff with I think that Nagy's done some decent stuff like putting Robinson in the slot and stuff like that, but it's this past year was just a nightmare. I mean, I don't want to totally be like let me say some good things about Matt Nagy, but at times they did some creative things to get him the ball. But I think more of it is it's a personality issue more than anything with Nagy and the way things ended there.
Oldheady 403 wants to know, is the potential still there for the Rams to run it back this year? And the answer is, I mean, absolutely it is.
Yeah.
They're sixth in our simulations in Super Bowl odds. So this is team, I mean, I think they're the clear favorite in their division, with Seattle taking a huge step back and San Francisco dealing with a rookie quarterback and Arizona having the problems that we'll talk about some more when we get to Arizona in a few weeks. But they added players, they added Robinson and they added Wagner, but they also lost a lot of players. So it feels like they're not quite as good as they were last year. The offensive line, I think, is where to really point to that. Not just losing Andrew Whitworth, although Joe Noteboom is a pretty passable left tackle to replace him, but the fact that they're depending on a third-round rookie at right guard. This is the team that doesn't want to draft anybody, and they're really depending on this. I mean, they're going to start a third-round rookie at right guard. Things are going to be a little bit more questionable, which means a little bit more pressure on Stafford, and a little bit more pressure on Stafford means he'll do dumb things a little bit more often, so probably won't look quite as good as last year.
The other concern I would have for the Rams is at cornerback, where Jalen Ramsey, A++++, good as it gets. The next top three corners, none of them had any good charting stats last year. They're all like bottom or outside of the top 60 in corners. So throw away from Jalen. It's going to be the plan A to beat the Rams every week. And
they really like Robert Rochelle, who was a fourth-round pick last year. But, I mean, there's no track record on that guy.
Right. It's all unproven. It's all because they had no choice. They had to promote from within pretty much any hole they had, except they added Wagner and Robinson is. It's not necessarily a 1-for-1 swap for Robert Woods, but it's a starting receiver out and a starting veteran out and a starting veteran in. So that's not a massive improvement. But yeah, Robert Rochelle is the guy they like, and
there's David Long and Troy Hill coming back.
Hill, thank you. Troy Hill, who did not have a good year in Cleveland at all, and David Long didn't have a good year last year. So they're betting on potential, which is all they can do at this point. But they won the Super Bowl last year basically with a stars and scrubs model. And this works when you have superstars and when you have the best wide receiver in the league and the best defensive tackle in the league and the best quarterback in the league, or at least a reasonable argument for all three of those, then you can make it work. It doesn't work if you have good players in those positions. You have to have the best players at those positions and a quarterback, and they got all those.
Any concerns about Stafford's shoulder right now? That's been popping across the news.
I know I've not been following day-to-day reports that closely. It sounds like an issue for now, but this is a guy who's a veteran, second year with the team. If this was a rookie, if this was Trey Lance in San Francisco, it would be very, very bad news. Right. As it is, he'll probably miss some time in camp and then step right in and pick up right where he left off. So I don't think it's expected to be a major issue.
Okay.
I'll point out the pass rush is another issue, by the way, because there's no Von Miller anymore.
No Von Miller.
And so now Justin Hollins, who's been around for a couple of years but has not really done much, is starting opposite Leonard Floyd. And, you can kind of get away with that because Aaron Donald is like two pass rushers by himself. But you still would rather have better edge rushers than what the Rams have.
You would always rather have Von Miller than not have Von Miller. It's a good plan for anybody.
Yes.
They feel like they could make another move like a Von Miller type of trade in the middle of the season. I wouldn't be surprised with that as well. Like I feel like they're a team that we always constantly have to say the roster that they go into week 1 with, probably not the roster that they enter the playoffs with, right?
That is true.
Obviously, they added Von Miller midway last year. They added Beckham last year midway through. Like they're definitely a candidate to do that every single season, and they probably don't. don't think it's like a stretch to say they don't get to the Super Bowl without Von Miller or Odell Beckham.
No.
Yeah, and they like Beckham was a huge part of that Super Bowl game plan as well. Like everybody has basically confirmed that, and you could confirm that by just watching the game.
Just watch the game.
That's another thing. Yeah, watch the game. Yeah, there's a good chance they add some significant players middle of the season. Obviously, we still don't know who those guys are going to be now.
What are they going to trade? A 2037?
That is the issue.
That's the thing, though. They've run out of ways of making that work. So I don't know how they're going to get that guy at the trade.
I was thinking Robert Quinn, the homecoming, but I don't know what they would Chicago for it.
I will add the year before they also added Jalen Ramsey midseason, so they do have a track record of doing this. But Mike makes the point: they are essentially broke. They have nothing left to trade in the near future, so that they're going to have to adjust and find a new plan because their old plan, the resources just aren't there.
Right.
But I think we all agree the favorite in the NFC West.
Yes.
I think very clearly, yeah.
Let's
all right.
What Vegas thinks here.
That's the LA Rams.
Division winner for the NFC West, excuse me. Rams at plus 125, 49ers at plus 150.
Yeah, I feel like that's got the 49ers a little too high.
Yeah.
With a rookie quarterback, that's a little too much trust. And I mean, not a rookie quarterback, but effective.
Well, he's a few weeks older. Trey Lance is a few weeks older than Malik Willis, who nobody expects to play this year. He's still younger than Matt Corral or Kenny Pickett or any of the other not prominent quarterbacks drafted this year. So he's still a kid, and it's fair to be skeptical about what he can do until he gets through a full year.
Let's talk about a team that we don't expect to be in the running for the NFC West Championship.
No.
But it's another interesting team to talk about the wide receivers on specifically. That's the Seattle Seahawks, who are down near the bottom of our projections, including having the worst offensive projection. Although I will point out, when you sub in Geno Smith as their starting quarterback instead of Drew Lock, which it now looks like they're really going to go with Geno Smith instead of Drew Lock, that actually does improve their projection a little bit.
It's Drew Lock's getting a lot of buzz. Am I not wrong? Drew Lock is getting a lot of buzz.
Yeah, but Geno Smith is getting all the first-team reps.
So far, Drew Lock has not had a first-team snap in practice. And we're 2 practices in. It's not let's not throw in the towel and declare this battle over. But so far, it's Geno's team. That is true.
So it brings up the question of what to do about great receivers with lousy quarterbacks when you go from a great quarterback to a lousy quarterback, because I think we agree DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett in particular is really kind of underrated. Like everybody knows DK Metcalf is a physical freak, but Tyler Lockett has had great numbers for a couple of years, really efficient as a deep route runner. And what happens when you give those guys Drew Lock or Geno Smith?
So this is interesting. Well, in the biggest picture, yes. And Lockett, I don't remember. I don't know if people remember this. A year or two ago, Russell Wilson had a perfect passer rating on throws to Tyler Lockett. He's been an efficient monster. He doesn't get the volume of a lot of other guys, but when they throw to him, it's a big play 3/4 of the time. DK is interesting because target for target, throw for throw, he had better numbers last year from Geno Smith than he did from Russell Wilson. And that includes the start of the year before Wilson's finger was injured. Now, a lot of this is that one long touchdown he had against New Orleans, and we're talking about a 13
it's a small sample size. It's 3 games.
Yeah, but it's frankly more a sign that the Wilson to Metcalf connection was broken than the Smith to Metcalf connection is gold. But Geno, if he's the quarterback, is going to look for DK a lot. Whether he can get the ball to DK remains a question, but he's going to try.
Matt, what do you got on this?
Oh man, I mean, the funny part about this whole receiver core is I especially in fantasy drafts, right? Because they're going to slip down the board. I have a tough time not allowing myself to visualize that these guys are going to be really good this year, because from an individual talent perspective, they're so good. Like, I think Metcalf is extremely promising. Obviously, he's been great as just like that ISO X receiver. He's not the full route runner, whatever, but who cares? Because he posts great success rate versus man press coverage, running slants, posts, goes, and he's developed a little bit as a route runner as his career has gone on. I'm with Aaron, though. Like, Tyler Lockett remains one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL. He's been at or above the 80th percentile in success rate versus man coverage for 3 straight seasons. He's been really good against zone coverage as like that inside vertical slot receiver. And he actually drew like a higher target share from Geno Smith, even though the results were in Metcalf's favor. Like, because you mentioned he has those longer touchdowns, stuff like that. So I think the gap between these two guys in fantasy drafts, I don't know that I'm really interested in clicking either one of them, but I think the gap between them probably should close a little bit. But it's just hard, right? I mean, this is not a serious quarterback situation. I mean, Geno Smith, Drew Lock, 2022. How is this like? It's a non-serious way to enter a football season.
I did this a couple weeks ago. I go back to when Washington had John Beck and Rex Grossman in 2011.
Yeah.
As their quarterback. So that was the worst quarterback competition I've ever seen, not counting a rookie or something like that. This is probably worse than that.
But it's a flame out. It's a guy who flamed out as a starter, Geno Smith, Rex Grossman, and like a guy that nobody thinks is promising except the head coach there in John Beck. Like, I used to live near DC in Fairfax, Virginia, and like the quotes that Mike Shanahan had about John Beck, it was like, what Dolphins games were you watching, my guy? Like, also, I mean, John Beck was also super old, but as for like a young player, but so yeah, you're right. That's a very good way to compare it. Just like a non-serious quarterback competition.
I mean, the one thing about these guys getting numbers in fantasy is that I can imagine that it would be not the third receiver is not going to get that many targets, whether it's Game or D. Eskridge.
Yeah. Did trade for Noah Fant though. That was part of the.
There'll be a 12 personnel team more than most teams. Going to go Fant and Disney as much as they can. I have said for a couple of years now that Metcalf and Lockett are like as a 1-2 wide receiver, you can put them against just about anyone, and then they'll stand up. But the drop off to the third receiver is just it's a straight vertical line. They don't use them. They don't want them. They kind of don't like them. They want to. That's one less person to be big, I guess. So it's, D. Eskridge was hurt all the time. I think he's hurt again now. So right now it's Freddie Swaim's job to lose as a third receiver. They're only moved to upgrade a couple of 7th round picks and Marquise Goodwin, because just like they're the team that's going to make Geno Smith a starter, they're the team that's going to make Marquise Goodwin a star. The ultimate faith in their abilities to polish these diamonds, I guess. But
if you try to tell the story of how Seattle, and right, we know going into the season, every team has a possibility of being a contender, right? NFL, right? There's lots of randomness. There's a big range of possibilities. But when you try to imagine what it would look like for Seattle to be a contender, you imagine that Geno Smith would have to be like kind of average, and they would just have to be really driven by defense. And then you look at the defense, and you're like, no, it's not look like a top defense. It just doesn't. The personnel doesn't. There's some talented players here like Darrell Taylor and Jordan Brooks, and Jamal Adams is good if you use him right. But at this point, he's almost gotten to the point of being so called overrated so much he's almost underrated, because there are things.
He's not a bad player. He's an overpaid player who they overtraded for. But he's not outright.
They want to do, and this is what they were doing moving towards last year, was doing more too high safety stuff. Jamal Adams is the wrong guy to be doing
no.
Right. And he's being fitted with a Winter Soldier arm. So keep that in mind, because of the surgical, they're fitting him with the Winter Soldier. He's going to be like Bucky. So that's going to make everything okay. Definitely get a lot of interceptions, fumble recoveries, and things like that when you're wearing an oven mitt to protect.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, Joey Sucks says the defense is average at best. The offensive line will be bottom 25%.
Yeah.
It is hard to see how the offense functions enough for them to be decent, and I think that that's basically true. Like
this
just looks like one of the worst teams in the league.
Yeah.
There's a delusion that a lot of Seahawks fans have that because they drafted 2 tackles, the offensive line will be better. This overlooks the fact that Dwayne Brown was actually still really good last year. Yeah. Most rookie first-round tackles are not as good as Dwayne Brown was last year, so that's a downgrade. Ethan Poitras was not very good last year, but Austin Blythe has been terrible. So they're worse at left tackle, though they're worse at center. You could argue that the right tackle has room for improvement, except Jake Kern has been the top guy there, and he was nightmarish last year. And the other guys can't beat him out.
Undrafted rookie starter last year.
Yeah, so no, this offensive line looks terrible. The quarterbacks look like, if we're ranking teams 1 to 32 on quarterback, they're 32. Yeah. Carolina may have had an argument for the Mayfield trade. Now they are not in the discussion. They have a better quarterback than Seattle does. I went through a while ago trying to find how many backup quarterbacks would at least have a reasonable chance to start for Seattle. I came up with like a dozen.
It's really funny because I did not read. I'll admit I didn't read Bill Barnwell's annual piece on skill position players other than the quarterback who has the best weapons. But I got to think Seattle came out pretty good because
the top 2 wide receivers are good.
Lockett and Fant and Rashad Penny and what people think Kenneth Walker can do. Ken Walker now. Yeah. That's a pretty good group with no quarterback and no offensive line.
Right.
And no depth.
There's some silver
and
line.
No depth.
The running back duo is like weird too. I mean, Penny has only had this like one great stretch in his career. Obviously, he's just been injured, all that type of stuff. But he looked great, was explosive last year. But like that was in the confines of that offense with Russell Wilson. Who knows what? He's a total wild card, and then Walker obviously like has some. Can he actually catch passes? Michael Sean Dugar from the Athletic has said that Travis Homer is still going to be involved as like the third down back that'll be a fun offense to deal with all year for sure.
Does anybody have any idea what the offensive mentality is supposed to be? I mean, I watched them last year, and it was do stupid things faster with more energy.
I mean, it was a lot of running and a lot of going deep, but if you're going to be losing by 14 in the second half, you're not going to be able to run that much. You're just going to go deep.
It was,
and also every offense with Russ is the Russ offense. Like I don't care if you bring in, Brian Schottenheimer, you try to do like the Shane Waldron thing, like offshoot from Sean McVay. That was great. Like all of the talk in the offseason was, we're going to get Russ more layups, like have him do. And I felt like that was kind of a good theoretical fit for Russ, like get him on the move, shots off play action, some of the layups that are in that Sean McVay offense. But to me, watching last year, for the most part, I mean, especially once he came back from that finger injury, which he came back way too fast from because he's just Russ. It just looked like the same old Russell Wilson offense, which I kind of feel like, by the way, Nathaniel Hackett's offense is going to strangely look a lot like the Russell Wilson offense. So I don't know. I think we might see whatever Shane Waldron's vision and Pete Carroll's vision for the offense is. I think we'll see it more this year than we did last year.
Last year was so weird. They were reasonably efficient in our stats. They just were never on the field. They had the lowest average time of possession of any team since the 99 expansion Browns.
Yeah.
And normally time of possession doesn't matter. It's what efficiency is what matters. But when you're at the extremes, things get pretty extreme. And that was pretty extreme.
That was very extreme. And it was an offense designed to generate big plays and nothing else, and a defense designed to prevent big plays and nothing else. So they were content to leave the defense in the field for a dozen plays at a time, hope they give up a field goal, and the offense gets a 50-yard touchdown or punts. And repeat for 17 weeks. It was
awesome.
Dude, I had to rewatch that season to write this chapter, and it was no fun. It was no fun. And
hey, at least they have a good punter.
It broke you.
They have a really good punter. A lot of practice. I got to write a lot about punting. Christ.
So, I mean, I think it comes down to Metcalf and Lockett and Cross with the next, with a year of experience. These will all be really good pieces for Stroud or Young.
Yes. To
Yeah.
answer your question you asked, in an extremely unlikely event, what does a 2022 Seattle Seahawks playoff team look like? They're the best rushing team we've seen since like rookie Cam Newton on the Panthers, and the defensive front seven. Every player plays to maximum potential in the front seven and is dominant to cover up. We haven't mentioned their corners. They're not. They're like the Rams without Ramsey is the Seahawks corners.
Artie Burns, like
Oh God.
Yeah.
Sidney Jones has been okay, but not
in his 1 year as a starter.
Yeah, and he's not anybody's idea of like being really above average. Justin Coleman had problems in Detroit, so he came back to Seattle.
So that's
Miami also, I think.
Which is why we don't think they're going to make the playoffs. But if they do, that's the most likely route.
Yeah, this is one where they came out in the playoffs in 24% of the simulations. And this is one where I feel like the fact that our simulations this year were uber ultra conservative makes me uncomfortable. That number.
You would take the under on the playoffs then?
Yeah, I mean, Matt, if you don't know, if you haven't seen in the book yet, like our projections this year came out even more. We're usually very conservative, and they came out even more conservative than usual this year. Like really, like packed around 500.
All the teams pushed together, yeah.
And Seattle, it just 24% just seems wrong. It just seems way too high.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yes.
I mean, but I feel like they got the DVOA projections for offense right. 32nd.
Right.
Yeah, 32nd. And by the way, if you sub in Geno Smith, their offensive projection improves from 32nd to 32nd by less.
Love it.
But Michael Dixon, third in special teams projection.
Well, his punting average should go up since he will be punting from midfield. He'll be punting from deep in his own end, so that'll boost his numbers.
That's a great point.
His Pro Bowl resume is stronger.
Joey Suck says a 2022 Seattle playoff team is a lot of other teams having quarterback injuries, and that I think also would Matthew Stafford would have to get injured for
his elbow would have to fall off.
A few teams like go missing. Their team bus gets like lost in the woods. It's something like that.
It definitely the simulation was definitely a little conservative, like I believe in being conservative because there is more randomness in the NFL than people want to believe. It was too conservative this year, and this is one of the teams where you can really see it. It's just too conservative.
You guys want some prop bets?
Sure.
These are alternate win totals available on DraftKings right now. Seattle Seahawks over 6.5 wins at plus 185. Anyone a believer enough, plus 185, go over 6.5 wins.
No, our simulation is just too conservative. I don't really believe they're going to do that.
Okay. I'm guessing you're a no-win since the Seahawks broke you. So
yeah, I can look up their schedule and try to find 6-7 wins here.
Okay. While you're doing that, here's one you might like. Under 4.5. So we're going into the disaster. Under 4.5, you can get the Seahawks at plus 200. It's pretty good meat on the bone for a 4-13 season.
4-13. And this is where you start to get into, as much as I do not like Pete Carroll as a team builder and a play caller and a game day decision maker, I do still think he is good at coaching football players and teaching them to play football and developing talent. So I don't know if they are going to be the worst team in the league, which is what you're talking about when you cross that 4-win threshold. So, I mean, honestly, right that 5-6 win mark seems about right to me. Let's see if we can find, what was it, over 6.5? 7 wins. All right, we got Atlanta at home. That's winnable. At Detroit, that's 2. Giants at home is 3.
We're off to a 3-0 start, baby.
Carolina at home at week 14. And then the Jets. A lot of bad teams at home. That might scare me away from the under. Was it under 4.5?
Yeah, I'm off the under now.
Yeah, they'll randomly beat either Arizona or San Francisco once out of 4.
They until proven otherwise, we still have the NFC West round robin where Seattle always beats San Francisco. Mm-hmm. San Francisco always beats the Rams. The Rams always beat the Seahawks. So there's probably a win or two. And they play Tampa Bay in Germany, and who knows, maybe Tom Brady's passport expires. So
see, there you go.
So I'm thinking right in that 5 or 6 win department. That seems very safe to me. Which unfortunately takes you out of either of those prop bets, Mike. So sorry to kill your bit.
That's the thing about these props. They're for people who are really speculating one way or the other. I'll give you one Rams prop bet because we're below the number. The number for the Rams is around 10
we are
and a
because
half.
of being ultra conservative. We're below the number.
We're below the number. Trying to dig it up here real quickly. You can get under 9.5 for the Rams, and I'm vamping a little bit as I try to grab it. Under 9.5 is coming in at plus 185.
Yeah, our average projection for the Rams was 9.5.
Okay.
So, and like I said, we're a little too conservative. I feel like you have to take our average projections and stretch them out a little bit. So I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, they do. They play the AFC West.
Yeah.
They play Buffalo.
We're right on the number at plus 185. I may invest these 200 Czechia rando beardos in this. I might put this much money down on that. I believe this is a dime, folks. So, yeah, we'll see.
I mean, I will say this. As much as I think the Rams are still the division favorites, on paper, this team is not as good as the team that won the Super Bowl, period, point blank. Can't be argued. Yeah. So, give me like 10, I'd probably take the under. Maybe 11, I would take the under for sure. So there's room for things to go deep south for these Rams. So it's not crazy. I don't think I would not take the under at 9.5, but it wouldn't be the biggest surprise in the world.
Well, the legit under is 10.5, and you can get that at minus 115. So that's like a standard bet.
That's 50-50, right? Basically,
that's a 50-50. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would take the under at that number, honestly.
Okay.
Interesting, but still likely to win the division.
But still likely to win the division.
Because the other teams are down. Because the other teams we feel are down from last year, and will.
Yes, I don't think the Cardinals and 49ers are as strong as the consensus on them is either. So
we'll get to those in a couple of weeks. So, All right, that wraps up today's show with the NFC West. Thank you, Matt Harmon. So, Matt. First of all, for people who don't know Reception Perception, you've got to check it out. It is receptionperception.com, right?
Correct. Yes. Very simple.
Yeah, it's just really amazing work at analyzing receivers on all the plays you don't see. So not just the targets. Mm-hmm. Plus, he is, of course, at Yahoo Fantasy and is the new host of the Yahoo Daily Fantasy Podcast. I don't know if that's the name of the podcast, but it's the Yahoo Fantasy Daily Podcast. Starting next week, you are the new host.
Yeah, well, officially the new host as of yesterday. We record our show here in a couple of hours as well. But, starting next week, we go to 5 shows a week, and then we'll be doing that all through the season. And, so I'll be hosting the pod every day. I hope people really check it out. It's the Yahoo Fantasy Football Forecast, which is a nice little playoff, what do you guys know more than, the weatherman or whatever type of thing. It's I think it's going to be a fun show. It's an unexpected move, but I'm really excited about it. It's like it's one of those career challenges that I've always wanted to try. So I'm pretty gassed up about it. And if people are, want feedback, like I'm open to feedback, I think it's going to be a fun show.
Awesome. And Vince, thank you for joining us today.
Always my pleasure.
Glad to be back.
Mike will be flush with European cash. Mike will be back Thursday along with Rivers McCown. Thursday, we are doing the Dallas Cowboys and the Washington Commanders.
It's Wentz o'clock, people!
So if you want to hear Mike say mean things about Carson Wentz, tune in on Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Same bat time, same bat channels, Twitch, YouTube, afterwards on the Football Outsiders Podcast Network. Don't forget to pick up your copy of the Almanac at Amazon or footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. And please make sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app and subscribe so you get all of our shows. So we'll be back Thursday at 1. Thank you, everybody.